Thanks for joining me again. Sometimes I'm notified about a rifle or I find out about a rifle, and I usually perceive that I don't have much time to make a decision because rifles seem to be in such high demand, especially the older rifles. So what I have to show you today is quite a unique rifle, in my opinion. And then there are two components really to the video. One is when I bought the rifle, I had no idea what the chambering was. There was no indication on the barrel. I had not seen the rifle, nor did I think that I would have time to see it. So I just bought it sight unseen and ended up going to pick it up. And the second component, I'll tell you in a few minutes, has to do with the remarkable optics that came with this rifle that made the whole deal just one of the best ever. But getting back to the first problem, so you read an advertisement that says it's a pre-64 action, so that immediately got my attention. And whoever it was I guess they took a look at the bore, and they felt it was a 7mm cartridge. And again, I'll fast forward to the moment I picked up the rifle and then had a chance to examine it right here in the studio. So it was in this very heavy stock. And if you know pre-64 Winchesters, and many of you know them probably better than I do, but there were versions of the Model 70, I think they were called Palma match rifles. This is not a Palma match rifle. Somebody went to great lengths. I mean, this is a very heavy laminate stock. But that's fine because this is a target or sniper rifle, depending on definitions. And you can see that it's a single shot. There's no floor plate. Target rails here, or one target rail, still retained by the typical 3 screws. So the bottom metal is gone. I think the trigger guard is probably original. And the butt plate is kind of cool. I hadn't seen one before. Maybe you've seen these, but you just undo this, and the butt plate can slide up or down. So I was showing this to somebody else, and most people say right away, well, why would you move the butt plate? And of course, that gives you a different orientation with your cheek on the stock. So you might want it higher for prone or for some other position. And the movable butt plate makes this one particularly very handy. It's very easy to manipulate. I've owned some where it's a little bit tricky, but not this one. And to get at the mechanism, the back flips open. So I mean, when I look at this kind of butt plate and the work, and this, I guess some people would call it a shoulder hook. It's possible that it's meant, to go under your arm. I'm not sure that that's true, but I've owned rifles like that from Switzerland, actually. Normally they have a little more contouring. Anyhow, when I look at a butt plate like that, I'm thinking, man, this has more work in the butt plate than most modern rifles have in the whole rifle. Somebody really went to town with this stock. For me, it's quite heavy, but it's very comfortable. And actually, they got everything about right. Remarkable precision work with the epoxy bedding. And you can see they even see this little support there? That's actually for the feed ramp, for the single shot feed ramp. So even the ramp is held in place from the bottom, which is a nice touch. I've seen this kind of thing before, but normally people will put a blob of epoxy and then press the action in place and with some wax so that it releases. But somebody went to the trouble of actually going over and over with a round file and making sure that it supported the feed ramp perfectly. So maybe getting to the action and the barrel, long, heavy barrel. To me, it looks like stainless steel. Because it has that kind of gray look, which often is, somebody playing with cold blue. Nothing wrong with that. Probably shouldn't have used the word playing, but testing different bluing, and you normally don't get the best coverage, but it doesn't really matter on a target rifle. In fact, if it is stainless, it could just as well stay stainless. And the action itself, of course, citizen above suspicion. This is 502 XXX, so I would have to look that up. I probably should have looked it up. Anyway, it doesn't matter. All the pre-64 actions are excellent. There's that feed ramp I was talking about. And I think that they've probably filed down the recoil lug a bit for whatever reason. And this thing fits super snugly, like the bedding is flawless. If you haven't seen this trigger, because everybody's used to, jewel triggers and other triggers, but years ago, what I was always buying were these can jars, and this is one of them. And I think it's still an excellent trigger. They normally came with this little puppy here, which is a trigger shoe, which maybe some younger viewers aren't familiar with. It just wraps around the trigger. It's retained by two tiny little screws. That's why that Allen key is there. And it distributes your finger pressure. And at that time anyway, a lot of people felt that gave you a little more control over the trigger pull, which it probably did. Anyway, I've always liked trigger shoes. They look great. But now getting to the mystery. So what is this fantastic rifle chambered for? Because we need to shoot it. And so when I kind of bought it, I thought it probably is a 284. And the 284 is that cartridge here. And I kind of sort of thought, if somebody put that much effort in. At one time, the 284 itself, or as a parent cartridge for a number of other cartridges, neck down and maybe even necked up, was quite a hot number. People had high hopes for the rebated rim. You can see that the case is actually bigger than the base. You can read about the 284 Winchester, quite interesting. Anyway, I tried to chamber it, and of course it didn't even do anything because the chamber is much narrower than the 284. So then I took out all the other suspects on your left. So I'm not sure why I put it here, but this is a 7x65R. That's the European rim version of the 7x64. And the 7x64 plays heavily in this story, which gets quite interesting. Next to the 7x64 is the 280 Remington. And just because of the shape of the shoulder, I tried to chamber these. The 280 wouldn't chamber at all. The 7x64 at first did not seem like it would chamber. And you can tell the 7x64 is almost identical to the 280. But there are some variations, so they're not interchangeable. But bearing in mind that I had no idea what this chamber looked like. So anyway, here's the 240 Weatherby, which is one of my favorite Weatherby cartridges that nobody talks about. The 708, of course, chambered because the dimensions, diameter is correct, but the length is wrong. And with a control round feed action, one can actually feed the round into the chamber and, generally speaking, fire the round because the claw extractor will hold the cartridge case against the base, the front of the bolt face. I'm not saying that that's a great idea, but it can happen. Next to that, 7x57. And right about now, people are saying, why didn't you just make a chamber casting to find out what it is? And I eventually did that, but I didn't have any chamber casting material. And I actually thought that, with my usual reference books, like I took out Cartridges of the World, and there are a lot of Wildcat cartridges in there. And for our younger viewers, that just means cartridges that aren't yet made by factories. And, people are constantly experimenting, which is a good thing. Anyway, so yes, that's why I didn't have a chamber casting. On the far, that's a 280. I tried to sprinkle 280s around because I felt after a few minutes that this is chambered for something based on the 280. 280 Ackley improved, or any of the 280, which the 280 being a neck down 30-06. But it seemed strange to me that it just seemed hopeless with the 280. Anyhow, we'll get to the point. And you can see that case here, this weird looking case. So that is a once fired. Now, how do you do that when nothing chambers? Well, it's not that difficult. I took a 7x64 and the bolt closed. The headspace was fine, and in fact was hard to close the bolt. And naturally, there was no projectile, so we were talking just about powder pressure, and you can read about how to do this kind of thing. And that's the resulting fire-formed brass, and you can see the unusual shoulder on that case. So the shoulder is much higher than a 280. If I didn't say it, I did say the 708 chambered, so did the 7x57. But this is what fire forming did. But you can see my pressure was a little low, or the brass was a little strong, depending how you look at things. So it didn't take the perfect shape of the shoulder, but you can see what a unique cartridge. Maybe one of you will recognize that. It doesn't really match up any dimensions in my wildcatting books. And I have some of these going back like 50 years. And because the wildcats change over time, sometimes they just get redacted from current editions. And then here is the chamber casting that I ultimately did. And you can see that this is the similarity. If you notice this monkey business at the bottom, that's a washer, because I made a mess with the casting material and I poured too much in there, and then it kind of got damaged taking out. But that is basically the full length of the case. And anyway, it doesn't matter. You can see the shortness of the neck and the unusual radius, which doesn't it remind you of the 240 Weatherby? Here you can see that they call it a double radius. By the way, the 240 did chamber, but that was because it's a 240. So of course, it's the diameter of the neck and everything is lesser than the 7mm, which this is. So that's what I have. And what am I going to do? Well, of course, I could probably get reloading dies, maybe with your help. One of you will say that's, a 280 OKH or something like this. And there are so many wildcats. Or maybe it's actually well known and I've just been in the cave for too long. But it'll be interesting. And if I can't find out then, and I don't feel like ordering dies and all the rest of that stuff, the 7x64 will work. And that's routine with a lot of the Ackley cartridges. You probably know this. You can usually use an Ackley factory, like a 25-06 in a 25-06 Ackley improved chamber, and then you have the brass made and you still get to use the original factory ammo. And actually I have exactly that, and I never did reload anything. I just used standard 25-06 and it shoots fantastically. So that's the whole saga of this target rifle. I don't know who made the barrel. It always puzzles me why somebody would put in this amount of work. And they really did a superb job on just about everything. And the trigger is not too sensitive, which is often the case, unfortunately. And then, you get things like slam fires where you just close the bolt harshly and the firing pin falls. But there is no marking on here. Nobody put anything, so that's fine. That's that. So I think you probably would buy this rifle if you're interested in pre-64s, just because it's such a unique piece. And I was debating whether to have it in pieces or assembled for you for the video. I decided more meaningful this time to have it in pieces. But then the best part of the whole deal was that in the written advertisement, it said that the rifle came with this scope. And I'll bring it out for you here. And that, of course, sealed the deal. Here, I'll set it where you can see it. This is an original Unertl scope. And these are just fantastic scopes, beautifully made. So we've talked about these before, but in case you didn't see that video, we're all used to internal adjustments, but at one time it was felt that internal adjustments maybe it's not the best idea. It gets very complicated very quickly, and there isn't much room. And so John Unertl, I think his name was John, from Germany, had worked for Fecker, and these were used on sniper rifles. You've probably seen them. It has to be, it has to have the most character of just about any rifle scope ever made, partly because of those fantastic mounts and just the spring, and of course that's returning the scope to battery. The scope moves within the mounts on recoil. So then the lenses and everything, they're not being held in place. Under all those G-forces, the scope is allowed to move. And then much like a shock absorber system in a car, it settles and then it's returned to battery, or you can return it to battery by hand. And it has an adjustable objective. So you can set this for 50, 100, 150, or 200 yards. I set it on 50 just because I was looking out the window. And one of the reasons I didn't rush to get the casting material right away was this was all mounted and beautiful and perfect. And I thought, I don't want to take this great scope. And I wasn't too familiar with the mounts. So I thought I obviously have to take it off to do a casting. So I thought I'd see if I could match it. And I'm still surprised that the 280 doesn't chamber at all, but the case length is the problem. The neck of the 280 is longer, even though the neck of the Wildcat, whatever it is overall shorter in terms of distance from the shoulder to the end of the case. Anyway, just a fantastic find. These are beautiful. Somebody will ask what kind of reticle it is. It's just a crosshair. Beautifully clear, 10 power. I'm quite confident in this rig. By the way, bore condition, whoever built this, they built it, and then like a lot of guns, I think it was stored. There's hardly any bolt face wear. There's no fire cutting around the primer. I mean, I think maybe as 100 rounds, I would be surprised. And when I cleaned the barrel, well, it was spotless. There was nothing in there. Yet it was dusty, so it had been sitting for a long time, and the scope was dusty too, in a closet, I guess. Anyhow, another amazing find, and these scopes have such character, and of course the Pre-64 is really untouchable as far as character and excellence in an action. I wish the stock wasn't quite as heavy. On the other hand, this is not meant for leaping around the willows after whitetails. It's a different creature, set up on maybe on a cut block or something like that. But we'll get this thing going and hopefully get some distance, because it's a high performance rig. I doubt that it's going to be inaccurate. I'd be very surprised. Anyhow, I hope you find that interesting. It's just out of this world. To have the original scope and the original mounts and everything untouched, excellent condition. I was really lucky once again. And if you see these scopes, maybe they look awkward to the untrained eye, but they keep going up in value. And these modern things, They have TV screens and, you know, distance and all that, but I still like this the best. It's kind of more of an adventure to own things like this. Anyhow, that's just my personal philosophy for what it's worth. All right, well, thanks for watching, and take care until next time. Bye-bye.